Welcome everyone. Today we're gonna talk about how to be a great CTO, so be a designer. I'm Matteo Toto from the UNGUESS team, and I am the CTO of this company. But even though I'm let's say a software engineer, I have always been fond of design practices. So this is our thoughts on how you should improve your process in a product company. So first, who we are. UNGUESS is the smart crowdsourcing platform for effective testing and real insights. We do it fast and at any time needed. Let's start from the beginning, the big fight we all have in our culturally, our everyday job. We know that between, as an example, developers see designer most of the time as kids playing around with colors, the same for project manager, Q&A, and etc. So we see a trend here. And we also see how different roles they think about themselves. Where are we as CTO? Of course, we are in this diagonal. We are almost perfect. We need to know a little bit of everything. And maybe this is true. We're gonna take a deeper look around. And also, I need to clarify that this topic is a bit. I have designers in my heart, so it's really winking to them. So I know their feeling. I know that many times when a business or developers they do this kind of questions, we break their heart. So let's start from the beginning. How to become a designer? Well, I think I need to break it out for you. How do you do? You need to hire designers. There is no simple rule. There is no simple path. In order to become a designer, you need to hire designers. So how? First, we need to have knowledge. We as developers, we are always angry when we see recruiters writing to us and stating, oh, I'm writing you because I see you have 10 years experience in Java. I have this opening for you as a .NET developer. And we get so mad, don't you? So this is the same. If you want to hire a designer, you need to understand the nuance and complexity of their job. You need to understand that there are really different roles. So I cannot go in deep on any of those. And also, there is not a specific description for anyone. There are some philosophical issues, but these are some broad conventions that we can agree on. For instance, a brand designer is a designer that is a kind of designer that talks about aesthetics, that is able to build a brand for your company. Is a kind of designer that is really good at talking to marketing and managing also advertising campaign, banners, all this kind of stuff. Then we move a bit towards user interface and visual design. This kind of professional is a bit more, it's getting closer to the digital stuff in a way. They love software, so they want to build a good and captivating interface. Then we go to the user experience designer. So maybe the UI and visual designer can also be an interaction designer. So it's someone that appreciate a lot, maybe the animation also. Animations are not only cool things to look at. They can be really useful in order to facilitate the understanding of an interface, of course. Then we have user experience designers. Again, take a look at the U that is becoming more and more present on those roles. They always start from the user, and this is something that maybe from time to time we do forget as engineers. But designers, they always start from the user. So user experience designer is a kind of designer that designs the process of the experience. This is important because it can happen. It's not given that you expect to be great UI designer from UX designers. Maybe they can also have no aesthetics at all. They can be really bad at choosing color and making pictures because they're expert of planning the experience of the users, not only what they see. Good. Then we go to product designer. In some extent, the difference here is just between maybe a UX designer is a consultant or in an agency. He or she helps a lot of companies, a lot of products. Product designer is a UX designer in a product company. Somebody may disagree, but let's keep with this definition for the moment. A content strategist is still a designer, but is a designer that does not create visual content. Maybe he or she just decides the strategy of the content that the campaign or the platform is going to have. And then we're moving towards words and not visuals anymore. So you have UX writer is what we are used to call copywriters, but it's a copywriter that is more expert in the context of software, in the context of applications. Copywriters, maybe they were just they were working in advertising and etc. Here we're talking about, when you talk about massive software, when you talk about software like Photoshop, it's really important to try to explain what a feature is doing. Or maybe Photoshop is not a good example because it's a specific tool for technical people, visual technical people. But you're building a software for a bank, you cannot ask just a developer or a designer to pick the labels of the content. At some point you really want to ask somebody else in order to have consistency among the platform and really make sure that people understand where they are going. And this is not only design, this is also not only visual design, it's UX writing, user experience design, and etc. Then we have user experience researcher. A UX researcher is not per se a designer, is a person expert of understanding and interviewing people. Most of the time they might be psychologists and not designer, not people being able to use Illustrator or Figma. And then in the end we have service designer. Again, really interesting. It's like, the UX designer, but of complete services. So a UX designer not only writes interfaces and a series of interfaces in order to achieve an action, but they also think about what do you do before getting to the software and after, if there is a ticket to print, if there's something to do. Cool. So everything we said right now is in the area of design. So if you want to become a designer, either you become one of those, or best you hire one of those. And then it's not only about roles, it's about practices, it's about knowledge. So what do they know? What are the techniques that they need to have? So as engineers, as developers, we understand that being a good software engineer is not only about coding. So there are way other practices that you need to know. Design patterns, testing, infrastructure, etc., etc. So these are practices that a designer needs to cover. Of course, nobody will have all of them. You can have user research, usability, heuristics, content audit, or branding, animation. You can also have HTML and CSS. We're going to talk about this later. It's important so to understand all these different competencies and to recognize them, because maybe you want a designer and you can be specific about what you expect from them. Expecting that a designer is really good at making surveys, it's not so easy, but it's really useful when you have one. And maybe you don't really need a designer that makes logos, because, you know, yeah, if you need a strong brand at some point, you're gonna make a design. Maybe you can go with an external agency, but you don't want to do logos every day. I'm talking about product companies. So you want to do surveys and storyboard every day. You don't really want to do logos. And this is what we expect most of the time, logos and graphic design. This is not 90% of design work. Let's go further. So we know this, we like it so much. In engineering, we have the concept of T-shaped professional, and I took this example from the internet. We see a really nice example of, let's say, a test engineer that, of course, we expect from him to be vertical on the test QA knowledge, but we also expect a bit of DevOps, a bit of UX design, a bit of unit test, and etc. Cool. So what is a T-shaped in the design field? Well, we can have, for instance, a person that is really expert about UI design, again, and does a bit of branding, a bit of user experience, a bit of prototyping, and a bit of front-end code. I really do like this slide, even though I want to point out that front-end code is not mandatory. I know, I understand many CTOs, many tech leaders, they expect designers to understand their language, and it's really useful if the designer does, but I swear to God, this is not mandatory. You want to work with professional, even if they don't understand code, but they are really good. If you have a good conversation between UI, UX, and now it translates to a design system, you don't need them to understand HTML. So how does this evolves? This is a picture that I really like, because if we invest a lot in having T-shaped professionals, either in engineering and in design, we ease the chance and the ability to have a proper conversation. It's like there is a translation from one side to the other and back and forth. One thing that I don't like about this slide, and I want to point out, is here it states connection. Both know how to use HTML CSS to a certain level. I don't like it because in some extent HTML CSS still is technical stuff. So it's like sounds only like a designer needs to study to talk to an engineer. This one I don't like. I do prefer that there are a bunch of practices or culture that they need to share. So as much as I expect from a designer to understand of a bit of coding, I do expect an engineer to understand a bit of information architecture or UI or heuristics or UX basics. And then what we can aim to achieve, to have an amazing process of co-creation. If also, let's say in some extent that the strategy people, like product manager, they also need to understand at least a bit of design concept, so that they need to focus on the issues, and then at some point they hand off the issue to the design team, and they will try to work on a solution, and then again the design team in some extent autonomously designs and proposes the solution, and the engineering team validates. Of course, there is a part of this picture that they love a lot, is this, how all those teams they work together, but I don't expect I'm not abiding to a massive waterfall, that there is a manager that designs something and the others they just implement. But it's important. So I also see a line from engineering to strategy and etc., of course, but I was not diminishing the importance of design engineering. I was empowering it, because I'm stating a strategist should have a bit of knowledge, but then they need to give full trust, and they cannot decide the design, they cannot decide the tech solution. They need to work on the issues, on the KPIs, if you like. But then there are other people better suited to find the solution. And of course, conversation is key. All right. So where are we going? Yeah, we saw roles, we saw practices, we saw how a person in a team should interact with others. But what's design? Is it just 1 or 5 or 10 of those practices? No, design is actually a process. Does it recall something? So I bet most of us, we are so used right now on agile concept, Kanban, Kaizen, and hopefully also some lean in the business world, lean startup. So as much, we're all saying the same thing. We understand as of today the importance in a complex world to iterate. There is no way we are so smart and so good at what we're doing that we can just take a decision and keep it for 6 months. I don't know. So design is a process. There is also a really famous quote I want to share with you from Dreyfus. Design is a process, an intimate collaboration between engineers, designers, and clients. This one I really like, and also makes me think of the slide, couple of slides ago, about the whole T-shaped working together. All right, so design is a process. I brought here design thinking. Let me make it clear. Design thinking, it's not the design process. It's just one of those. Since I'm assuming you're not so familiar with those concepts, I decided to bring this one that became really famous 10 years ago and made the startup world crazy. Everybody's talking about it. I really like it. I really like the concept it brings to the table. I don't think it's the best one, or I don't think that it's just a solution, but it's a sort of scrum of design, let's say. So design thinking is a methodology that states that there are 5 phases of a design process, and as soon as you understand the difference, there are a lot of practice in each of those. Empathize is the part in which you really understand the needs of the customer, the user. Define is the part in which you define what you extracted. Ideate, you start thinking of solutions. Prototype, you try to make it concrete, and then you test it. The really cool thing that I found is this. Once you understand all the building blocks, you can use them in the order you like. So again, I think this is really cool for people, external people. So a lot of professional designers, they already don't like it because it's too simplistic. But for us, it's a really good tool. So you should read a bit of design thinking and realize the importance of separating empathize from define, from ideate, etc. Cool. So, still, you have to become a designer, we said. How do you do? Just be it. I was faking before, but yeah, you need to understand that the best way is to hire a designer, if you need a designer, and maybe learn from him or her. How do we do? Again, just be it. What I wanted to say is that actually we are already our designers. But what we could do to improve in our work is understand the nuances and complexity of what separates us from the user. Because again, like us as engineers, we tend to think to technology first. It's so important to design from the user, not the technology. And actually, the funny thing is that we find this many times in Lean and Agile. So I'm not making up something for you today. I'm not just sponsoring freak design, freak ideas. It's what we already know, but we tend to forget it so many times. And we, as CTOs, we need to educate our organization, because I think that business people are a bit different from our mindsets. But us designers and engineers, we are so close. We are actually creators. So for us, I hope you know the concept of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But for us, this is so much more important. And then try fearlessly. What, you might ask? Well, I have for you some design practices, some games, some techniques that you should use even if you haven't studied, even if you're not a designer, because they help you. Let's see them. Scamper. This is really famous. This is also used in theaters and creative works. Scamper is an acronym, stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, reverse. And you should take your product, think about the problem, and then try to modify it creatively with those inputs. So substitute a part of the product with another that works better. Combine also with other products or different components. Adapt, modify, and etc. This is you can do it alone, you can do it with pen and paper, or you can do it in a workshop with other people with different job role maybe. You will be astonished by some proposal that they might come out. Customer journey map. I put it as second, even though it's so complex, because I want to make a point. So the customer journey map is the map of the journey of the customer. Sorry for the trivial sentence, but it's try to write down what is happening on your platform by the eyes of the customer. So it's not important where is the first API call, the payment, and etc. It's important to understand the action from the customer. And then working backwards, at some point we can also write what's happening in the back office. But you start from the customer, you see? Journey phases, user action, touch points, problems, insight, and the sentiment. This is a picture made from one of my designers, and it's a really good implementation. But I also have a picture of mine. So this was made 2 years ago. And of course, it's so clear the level of quality on the other one. But see, I needed to clear my mind on what was happening. And I came out with a similar, I read something, I tried, and this helped me a lot. So still, if you see a document like this, I haven't studied to do it. I just read an article and I said, okay, let's try. Those are the customer, this is the action, you write a legend, and you're done. It's so useful to conversate on top of one of these documents, not just talking and not just writing specs. This is so more useful. Let's go further. Crazy 8s. This is my favorite. It's so simple. Crazy 8 is just the idea of, again, you can do it alone or you can do it with other people. The idea is to think about a problem or even a design. It's so common to use it for design, as you see in the right picture. Think of a problem or a design or a small task, and you give yourself 8 slots of 1 minute. You can tweak it as much as you want, of course, but it's really cool to make it with 8 slots of 1 minute. And in each minute, you should sketch or a different idea. Anytime you do it from scratch, you need to think differently. So this pushes you to try to think of a different solution. If you do it in many people, it's even more effective. Or also you can spot trends. If many people design a similar thing, that's a good thing also, maybe. Let's go. Storyboard. Again, this might be such trivial proposal, but still, are you doing it? Are you really doing it every time you develop a new feature, a new process? Are you bringing your stakeholders and developers on a document like this? Are you making the conversation on top of this? If you do, it's great. You already are a designer. But if you aren't, please do. And of course, I'm quoting here some really cool tools: Balsamiq, Figma, Marvel App, InVision, but whatever you like. Usability heuristics. Okay, this is really interesting. There are several. It's not a scientific thing. Those are the one by Nielsen Norman, so one of the most used. Heuristics are a couple of rules that if you follow them, you will increase. The rules are really assertive, and if you follow them, the interface will look more familiar to the customer by default, because these are a mix of best practice and also rules that everybody's following. So, and things that we translate from real life to digital life, and etc. I will take the most trivial: consistency and standards. Of course, I'm telling you, the buttons should look all the same. If you're doing a software with 10 pages and 5 different kind of buttons, you're doing wrong. You don't need a designer to understand this. You just read these 10 points with the explanation and you, okay, maybe let me clear all the buttons. Let me clear all the windows. Let me make that the navigation is consistent on every page. This is so simple, yet many times we develop new places of the platform and we add new component or we change the navigation. Let's go. Dot voting. This is so simple yet so powerful. This is not let's say, design technique. This is a facilitating technique, but designers should be able to facilitate a lot. We don't expect them to create without asking. Designer should always ask, as much as I don't expect it by an engineer anyway. The thing that I like most is the HIP effect, so highest income person in the office. So it's the fact that, of course, it's like groupthink. The groupthink concept is that in a group of people, at some point, everybody will lean towards the same idea. If you make, if there is a manager or a really senior person in a team making a decision, the chance that the decision will lean towards that person is so high. So by doing this, and maybe also by not reading out loud when somebody writes and attach the post-it, you are detaching a bit the ideas proposed by the person proposing. This is so important. And thinking aloud. I hope you recognize the meme in the center. It states, most of the time problems exist between keyboard and chair. So it's never the software, it's the people. But these developers use it to lament about how stupid users are. But we are CTOs, and we are a designer from today. So we do understand the importance of users. So as said before, UX, UI, etc., etc. So we value so much user feedback that we understand that we need to listen to them. Thinking aloud is, again, is one of the most used practice all around the world by Nielsen Norman, etc. It's just about hearing the user thinking aloud while using your software. You should give them a task, organize your holidays, buy a house, buy the furniture for a restaurant. So not too complex tasks, but not too trivial, not too small. And then you just listen. So again, it's one of those things in which you have a designer really good at making questions and listening. Perfect. You haven't, it's not a problem. you will be amazed by what comes out from this kind of conversation. And this is something we do every day, because in UNGUESS, one of our product is that when we gather the proper people, your customers, and we ask them to record themselves using your software with a script, and we hand over videos, and it depends also the insights. So we love this practice, and as I told you, you should or could have an internal designer. You could do it yourself, or in some case maybe you can also call us. We are here to help. So I'm glad if you follow me and up to this point. It was very important for me to share these thoughts and what we're working hard in UNGUESS. If you have any question, don't hesitate to write me via email or just add me on LinkedIn. Thank you.